The lights were blinding. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Inside the sleek, ultra-modern International Press Summit, the world's most powerful leaders gathered, suits crisp, voices tense. Then it happened. U.S. President Donald Trump adjusted his tie, leaned toward the mic, and with a smug smirk said, "Let me be clear. Captain Traoré's actions in Africa are disrupting global order. If this continues, we're prepared to pursue serious legal consequences." Gasps swept through the crowd. You could hear the air shift. Journalists whispered. One woman in the back dropped her pen. Traoré sat motionless, still, quiet, wearing his brown military fatigues, eyes steady beneath his beret. No flinch, no fear. A child watching from a village school TV whispered to his teacher, "Why is Trump angry at the man who gives us water?" Silence fell. The studio, full of noise seconds ago, froze. Trump folded his arms, smug and certain. But Traoré slowly stood. Reporters turned. Cameras zoomed. His voice was calm. "I don't bow to threats. Not from you. Not from anyone." And just like that, history began to write itself. Traoré's voice was quiet, but it cut like fire through glass. Reporters froze mid-breath. World leaders stared. Trump shifted in his seat, lips pressed thin. "Legal threats," Traoré said, stepping forward. "From the same voices who once told us we were nothing, now accusing us for choosing to stand tall." A young intern watching the broadcast in Nairobi wiped tears from her cheek. "He's not just talking to Trump," she whispered. "He's talking for all of us." Traoré looked directly at the cameras. "We rebuild from the soil you took. We educate our children with torn books. Yet you fear us when we stand." Behind him, the studio's giant LED wall flashed images of Burkina Faso. Dusty streets, children smiling under broken roofs, and villages where water pumps wore the name Traoré. Trump interrupted. "This is grandstanding," but his voice cracked. Traoré didn't look at him. He looked into the lens. "Africa doesn't owe you silence." He stepped back. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The world stared. Then suddenly, a tear rolled down the cheek of a French journalist. Within hours, the clip exploded across social media. Traoré Speaks trended worldwide. In Ghana, students stood around phones crying. In Chicago, an African-American veteran tweeted, "I served under U.S. flags, but tonight I salute Captain Traoré." In a small radio station in Mali, a blind elder whispered. His voice shook the earth. Meanwhile, inside the summit studio, Trump leaned back, visibly rattled. His legal team whispered frantically behind him, scrolling their phones. They hadn't expected this. Behind the cameras, a young producer turned to her boss and said, "We just recorded a moment people will play for the next 50 years. But Traoré wasn't done. He walked back to the mic. His voice, still calm, now carried an ancient sorrow. "We were called poor, yet our lands made empires rich. Now we ask for dignity and we're told it's rebellion?" A reporter dropped his notepad. Children watching in Ouagadougou clutched their hearts. Some cried. And in that moment, the story was no longer just about Trump. It was about history, pain, and a man who refused to be quiet. Traoré's words floated in the air like thunder held back by wind. "I don't bow to threats. Not from you. Not from anyone." The room didn't just go quiet. It froze. Even the translators in their glass booths forgot to translate. Trump stiffened. His face twitched, but he didn't reply. His legal advisor reached for his shoulder, but Trump waved him off. Then, click. A single camera operator zoomed in. Then another. And another. Screens around the world lit up. In a cafe in Accra, a mother feeding her baby gasped so loudly the spoon dropped. In Berlin, a college student pulled out her phone and whispered, Who is this man? Traoré stood alone. No podium, no script, just his truth. You sent armies. We buried our children. You sent aid. We sent our gold. And now, because we choose to rise, you want to punish us? Somewhere in the back, a reporter's eyes welled with tears. And for the first time, even Trump looked unsure. The studio lights shone on Traoré like he was glowing. You say I'm disrupting global order, he said quietly. But whose order? No one dared move. Was it order when you armed rebels to keep us divided? Was it order when African children died for minerals sold in Western stores? A French journalist looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Traoré's voice didn't tremble. Not once. We are tired of being polite while bleeding, tired of smiling with dry throats. You call this disruption? I call it awakening. In a refugee camp in Niger, families huddled around a small TV. One woman whispered, "He speaks for us, all of us." Then Traoré stepped forward. We don't want war. We want justice. We want space to dream without fear. And we will take that space, no matter who threatens us. Trump leaned forward, lips pursed, but said nothing. It was the first time in decades that a man from Africa had stood before the world and refused to kneel. And not just refuse, but inspire. Outside the studio, the world was erupting. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, news networks, all flooded with clips of Traoré's speech. A modern Mandela has spoken, someone tweeted. Hashtags like Traoré Truth, Africa Speaks, and No More Silence were everywhere. But inside the summit room, something unexpected began to happen. A reporter from Canada stood up, applauding. Then another from India. Then an elderly journalist from Liberia whispered, "It's been decades since I've seen a man speak this honestly." But Trump clenched his jaw and leaned into the mic. Are we just going to let him lecture us like saints? This man has interfered with U.S. interests. We're not here to take a sermon from a soldier. Traoré didn't flinch. I am not here to be liked, he replied. I am here to tell the truth. And when he said that, a journalist in the front row quietly started to cry. The summit had turned from policy to something bigger, something raw, human, and uncontainable. And somewhere, a child in a dusty village whispered to his sister, I want to be like him. As the world watched Traoré's speech spread like wildfire, something unexpected happened back home. In the heart of Ouagadougou, inside a crowded public school with broken windows and no electricity, a teacher pulled out her phone. Her students sat on the floor, barefoot, silent, watching Traoré's speech from a single cracked screen. When he said, I am not here to be liked. I am here to tell the truth. One boy, barely 10, clenched his fist and whispered, That's our president. Minutes later, Traoré's assistant walked quietly to his side and whispered something that changed his face. Sir, Washington just called the ambassador. They're demanding we issue a formal apology, or they'll freeze all aid. The room stiffened. Cameras didn't catch it. But Traoré nodded slowly. Then he whispered back, Tell them I've already made my choice. Back home, the teacher texted the video clip to her cousin in France. Within hours, it had over 3 million views. Something had shifted. This was no longer about diplomacy. It was about dignity, and the world could feel it. Across the world, something extraordinary began happening. Not politicians, not pundits. Mothers began to speak. In Sierra Leone, a woman who lost her son to war posted a tearful video. We buried our children quietly, and now this man, this Traoré, he speaks what we never could. In the U.S., an African-American mother who watched the speech with her teenage son said on TikTok, He talks like Martin, like Mandela, but from now. And my son? He sat still the whole time. The comments flooded in. I'm crying. This broke me. Why has no one ever said it like this? Even some Western journalists, usually cold and controlled, got emotional. A BBC analyst, live on air, blinked back tears and said, "Whatever your politics, you have to admit, the man's voice carries something ancient and unshakable." Meanwhile, inside the summit room, Trump fumed. His legal team passed him documents. He scribbled across them, "We go public. Leak the intel, now." But outside that studio, people weren't waiting for legal drama anymore. They were following a man who finally made their pain visible. An hour after the summit's lunch break, something dark happened. A U.S. news outlet published a sudden leak. They claimed Traoré had once rejected foreign vaccines. They called him dangerous. They labeled him a threat to humanitarian efforts. The timing was no accident. It was meant to break him. Reporters in the room immediately turned. Questions flew. "Captain Traoré, is it true you denied foreign aid during the outbreak? Are you responsible for avoidable deaths?" Trump sat back, watching with satisfaction. But Traoré didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small folded photo and held it up. "This is Fatimata," he said. "She died at 8 years old, not because of lack of vaccines, but because the clinic had no power to store them. Our grid was shut down by sanctions." The studio fell into stunned silence. "You gave us medicine we couldn't keep cold. You gave us food with expiration dates, then blamed us when it spoiled. Don't pretend it was generosity. It was control." A journalist began to cry. Another removed her headset. Trump stood up to interrupt. But now, even some of his allies looked away. Traoré had turned the trap into truth, and the world saw it. As the press chaos calmed, a quiet studio assistant rushed toward the stage, holding a sealed envelope. "It was hand-delivered to the lobby," she said. "They said, 'It's urgent.'" Traoré took the envelope gently. On the front, "For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, from Abdul, age 11. He opened it slowly. Inside, written in shaky blue ink, "Dear Captain, I live in Kaya. My school has no roof. But we watched you on my uncle's phone. You made us cry, not because we are sad, but because someone is finally telling the truth for us. Don't stop. Please. Even if they threaten you. My mother said you are the only man she trusts." Traoré's hands trembled slightly as he folded the letter back. He looked around the room. The tension was still thick. Trump was smirking again, readying his rebuttal. But Traoré leaned into the mic and said, "This is why I speak. Not for pride, not for politics, but for Abdul and the millions like him." The room quieted. One journalist covered her mouth, sobbing softly, and the world began to feel why this was no longer a debate, but a battle for dignity. Behind the stage, chaos brewed. Trump's media advisor rushed in, phone in hand, whispering, "We need to bury him, now. Leak the Niger transcripts. Play the Mali unrest. Push the Traoré instability narrative." Trump nodded. "Good. Paint him as dangerous, unpredictable." Meanwhile, on a dusty street in Burkina Faso, Abdul's mother stood by a solar-powered radio. Around her, dozens of neighbors gathered to hear the summit broadcast. One woman asked, "Do you think he's safe?" Abdul's mother replied, voice strong, "He's not safe, but he's right. And that's more important." Back inside the summit, a staffer approached Traoré quietly. "Sir, CNN and BBC are preparing a story that accuses you of anti-Western propaganda. It airs tonight." Traoré looked down at Abdul's letter, now folded neatly in his chest pocket. "Let them air it," he said calmly. "Truth doesn't need good press, it just needs to survive." His composure didn't crack, but everyone could sense something was about to erupt. The air in the studio was heavy, like the moment before a storm. Trump checked his mic and smirked. My final statement will end this, he whispered to a nearby reporter. But what he didn't know was that Traoré wasn't finished either. Trump stood up slowly. All eyes turned. We've tolerated enough, he began. This man, this so-called leader, is undermining alliances, disrespecting American leadership and fueling anti-Western hate. There will be consequences. Legal, economic, diplomatic. A few claps came from his corner of the room, but most of the studio sat in uneasy silence. Traoré remained seated. Then, he stood, slowly, calmly. And in that moment, time seemed to stop. You mistake love for rebellion, he said. Trump narrowed his eyes. You mistake pain for provocation. You mistake silence for weakness. But our silence was survival, our pain, centuries old. And now, we speak. Not in anger, but in truth. The mic echoed. Traoré scanned the room. Reporters, leaders, critics, allies. If you bring sanctions, we will plant food. If you block aid, we will build our own clinics. If you attack my name, I will still protect my people. And then he looked straight into the camera. You want to break me with papers and politics, but I was raised by mothers who boiled leaves to survive. What can you threaten me with? One journalist gasped out loud, and at that exact moment, viewers around the world began to cry. Right as Traoré's final sentence echoed through the air, the studio screens behind him began to flicker. Then, a sudden interruption. A breaking news alert flashed on all monitors. Exposed secret deals between Traoré and military contractors. Gasps, panic, phones lit up. Trump turned and grinned. I told you, this man is not what you think. A voice from the production booth shouted, this wasn't in the script, someone's hacked the feed. But Traoré didn't blink. He walked straight to the screen, raised his hand, and unplugged it. The screen went black. You're scared of my voice, he said calmly. So you lie. But truth cannot be hacked. A young reporter, shaking, stood up. Captain, are the accusations true? Traoré pulled a folder from his briefcase and held it up. These are receipts for every national project we've funded. Clinics, schools, wells. All public, all audited, unlike your offshore accounts. Trump's face flushed. Cameras zoomed in. The crowd, once unsure, erupted into applause. In that moment, millions watching from phones, radios, and rooftops realized this wasn't just a defense. It was a revolution in real time. The room settled again, but hearts were pounding. That's when it happened. A seasoned journalist, Elena Cruz from Spain, rose to ask a question. She'd covered wars, famines, uprisings. Her voice was always cold, controlled. But today, her voice cracked. Captain, may I speak from my heart? Traoré nodded. Years ago, I covered a famine in the Sahel. A child, maybe 5 years old, died in my arms. I tried to stay neutral, professional. But that night, I cried until I couldn't breathe. She paused, fighting tears. Today, you said something I haven't heard in 20 years on this job. Truth doesn't need good press. It just needs to survive. That broke me. Her voice shook. Cameras captured her, wiping her eyes. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say, thank you. No one clapped. No one spoke. Even Trump looked uncomfortable. Traoré nodded slowly. Thank you for remembering. That child deserves it. That moment, one woman's broken truth and one man's quiet dignity shattered the internet. Clips spread in every language. And across Africa, people cried. Not because they were sad, but because finally, someone had made their pain visible. For the first time since the summit began, Trump said nothing. He didn't interrupt, didn't tweet, didn't smirk. The energy in the room had shifted entirely. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the cameras slowed, like they didn't want to break the moment. Traoré walked back to the center of the stage. He didn't speak about politics or power. Instead, he reached into his jacket and unfolded Abdul's letter, the one written in blue ink. "A child wrote this," he said gently. "He said his school has no roof, but he still believes in hope." He held it up. "You want to sue me for disturbing global order? Maybe, just maybe, the world needs to be disturbed." He took a breath. Because if a child without shoes can believe in justice, then what excuse do we have? For a full minute, no one moved. Then, a single person stood, then another, and another. Soon the entire studio stood, applauding, crying, some holding hands. Even journalists from countries that once condemned Traoré stood. And far away, in a small classroom in Kaya, Abdul stood too. He looked at his mother and whispered, "He didn't forget me." Just as the standing ovation echoed across the studio, the back doors opened. A woman, older, thin, dressed in simple African fabric, stepped inside, escorted quietly by security. She wasn't on the guest list. No badge, no makeup, just presence. The studio paused. Even Traoré turned. She raised her hand. "Captain, do you remember me?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, Mariam." Whispers spread. Cameras zoomed. Mariam stepped forward, her voice soft yet unshaken. "My son was one of the soldiers killed in the north. You came to my house, not with press or guards, but with water and cloth. You held my hand. And you said, 'His life was not wasted. I promise you, Mama.'" A tear ran down her cheek. "Today, I came to say you've kept that promise." She turned to the room. "If this man is dangerous, then he's dangerous to injustice, not to peace." The audience was silent. Even Trump lowered his gaze. In that moment, millions watching around the world broke into tears. It was no longer a debate, it was personal. And Traoré stood quietly, his hand over his heart. Just before the summit closed, producers received a final alert. A video just uploaded to the internet was going viral faster than anything they'd seen all week. It was Abdul again, standing barefoot in his schoolyard, his voice shaky but strong. "President Traoré, don't stop. If they block you, talk louder. If they threaten you, stand taller. You're not just our president, you're our voice." The video cut to clips of kids in Ghana, women in Kenya, farmers in Chad, all holding handwritten signs. "We don't bow to threats. Truth is not illegal. I am Abdul." The room changed. Foreign leaders looked away from their prepared statements. A few ambassadors wiped their eyes. And finally, after nearly 3 hours of tension and truth, Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked to the podium one last time. "You tried to silence me with lawsuits, but now you hear me in the voice of a child." He looked directly into the camera. "If this summit was meant to break me, I am still standing." The applause that followed was not just loud, it was global. As the summit officially ended, journalists rushed to write headlines. Trump exited early, face tight, jaw clenched. But Traoré stayed. He walked to every group, thanking them. No security wall, no arrogance. In Burkina Faso, Abdul's school roof was repaired the following week. An anonymous donor had paid in full. Locals said it came from a European who watched the speech and cried. Across Africa, donations surged to small local charities. A new scholarship fund was named, the Abdul Promise. But the biggest moment, one line. Traoré's final words to the press. They called it a press summit. I call it the day Africa stood without shaking. He walked out, not a victor in a fight, but a man who had protected millions with words. And that, more than anything, left the world speechless. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from and how this made you feel. If you cried at any point, don't be ashamed. That means your heart is still alive. Subscribe because we are telling the stories the world often ignores. Stories that make you feel, that make you think, that give you hope. And don't forget to like this video, not for views, but to tell the world you believe in truth, in dignity, in men like Captain Ibrahim Traoré.